Beyond and hello, everyone. My name is Jonathon Dornbush, and this is Podcast Beyond, episode 611, IGN's weekly PlayStation show, where we promise to talk to you about PlayStation at least 25% of the time. I'm joined this week by Max Scoville.
Hey.
Lucy O'Brien.
Hello.
And Tom... Oh, man. I have so many guesses that I've already done, but I don't remember any of them. Rutabaga Marks.
Nope.
Darn. Would be a nice callback.
I was close, though, probably.
Yeah.
For everyone who listened to the E3 Spectacular, that would have been a very wonderful guess.
The
Anyway,
long con I was playing.
of course. Sadly, it wasn't. We'll find out one day. But of course, we're not here just to talk about Tom's middle name. We are here to talk about the world of PlayStation. And there's not been a lot of news in the world of PlayStation this week. So I thought we could go back into a little bit more discussion of PlayStation 5. Obviously, there was a lot to unpack last week. Lucy and myself were not there, so you got to hear.
I just want you to know that you're only going to get partial credit for it because you were absent last week.
That's fair. You did a wonderful job.
Make up PlayStation 5 discussion.
This is our summer school. Thank you, by the way, Max, for hosting last week.
Yeah, of course. I thought it was great. It was good to have me back. I really missed me.
I did too.
I'm just kidding. I hated hosting.
Well, I'm glad to have you still on the show.
Yeah. Well, I know honestly, I was saying this to you, but like if you want people to really appreciate you as a host, all you have to do is just stop doing it for a year and then come back.
I did notice the number of Jonathan comments. Thank God Jonathan isn't here. Really went up. It was like, oh boy.
Also, please don't do that. It's awful and rude. Just stop doing that.
I get it. I get, this whole they just got rid of Lucy. I understand you feel that way, and I'm so sorry. But unfortunately,
she's back.
I'm back.
Much like Knack, Lucy is back. But no, of course, I thought we could talk about PS5 specifically to tie into a feature that I've been writing that Lucy dutifully asked me to write. And will be up on the site as you are listening or watching this episode, so go to IGN.com to read all of that. But I thought we could talk a little bit about PlayStation 5 launch games. I think a year ago or so, we came out with a wish list, but it basically was just hey, we want a bunch of PlayStation sequels. So I thought we could expand out from that. I've put together a list of games I think both a little bit wish listy and also common sense what we'll see next year. So what I wanted to do was, one, hear from all of you about what you think may launch, and two, throw out my suggestions and see how likely or unlikely you think they are. Or are we going to rock, paper, scissors to see who goes first?
No, I'm just excited. I'm excited.
So you just started punching your hand.
Yeah, okay. So I want to get into it. I want to
I think
crunch the numbers and wax lyrical. This is a very exciting topic. There are so many games that the interesting thing is launch games are never traditionally super memorable.
Recently. That's definitely in the past.
Recently.
Yeah.
But in the past they have been.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm always a bit trepidatious when it comes to sort of saying what I want, the games that I want to see at launch, because it's I would prefer them to kind of explore the technology more, and I would prefer to see it, once it's really, the console's really singing at the top of its lungs. But at the same time, I'm really, really greedy. So let me hear what you have to say.
So, on that note, the weirdest thing to me is I think the best launch of anything in recent years has been Apple Arcade.
Yeah.
So
it's true.
Console launches have not been historically the best in recent years. I'm hoping this one could change, even though 2020 is already so stacked. But anyway, let me go into some of my recommendations or suggestions for what I think will come out and hear what you guys think. I think one of the most obvious ones is going to be the new Assassin's Creed. Ubisoft skipped a mainline Assassin's Creed this year, instead opting to focus on Assassin's Creed Odyssey DLC. They've said they don't want it to be an annual franchise anymore. That said, every other year still kind of makes sense for them. Especially, there were some hints in the game of maybe leading toward a Viking Assassin's Creed, so that seems to be the direction they're going. It is undoubtedly one of, if not Ubisoft's biggest franchises. Black Flag was a really big launch game that was cross-gen last generation. I feel like it totally makes sense that Assassin's Creed Vikings is going to come, whatever it's called, at the launch of the PS5 and Scarlet, but we're not talking about that here. Mostly because, one, these are now these really big, ambitious, open-world RPGs that are so about showing off this beautiful environment, having really complex AI working in the background of the NPCs that you're interacting with, having a lot more systems involved. And I think the idea of showing what new gen can do with all that, this seems like an obvious candidate. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think that's a good bet, but also that seems like one of those launch games to me that would be maybe a launch title, but also would still have to come out for PS4.
Yeah.
Right? It would be one of those cross-launch titles, which are not uncommon. It's just really, it's always interesting when that happens, though, because I feel like those games can't always take advantage of what next gen can do right out the gate, right? Because they have to cater to two different systems. And it'll be also interesting if we just get different, like if we just get different versions of those games. We're at the point now in where it's not impossible to make an Assassin's Creed Vikings game that just is better on a next gen system, has more, has a patch that just adds more despite being the same game. Whether it's, obviously things like load times will be better just naturally, but like you were saying, like maybe they do a patch for next gen systems for a game like this that allows more NPCs to be on screen or allows them to take advantage of some of these other things in a way that I feel like we haven't really seen that happen with cross-gen games before, where, Destiny 1, I think it went to both systems, and it was like, and that, I don't know if that was a launch game, I don't remember the timing of that, but like it was basically the same game. It was just like a little bit nicer looking and ran a little bit better on modern stuff. And yeah, I'd love to see a company kind of break out of that, and I think Assassin's Creed potentially is a really good candidate for that.
You don't think they'll just black flag it?
I don't know. I mean, I think they could.
Yeah.
That's the sad.
I mean, I say this with absolute adoration for that game.
Yeah,
Because what was remarkable about that game was the game itself. It wasn't necessarily that it was stretching, the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4 to their limits.
Yeah.
It was just a really excellent game to launch any console with.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can see where you're coming from. You can also sort of imagine them just going the other way, where it's just like, oh, it's the same game but a little prettier.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I hope that the fact that like 7 years ago, day one patches and all that stuff was part of gaming culture and it was there, but now it is just so expected and so ubiquitous that I'd like to see a developer sort of take advantage of that a little bit if they can.
Ubiquitous is the key word there. It's Ubisoft, ubiquitous software. No, they.
Is that what it stood for?
Yeah.
Oh man, I had no idea.
Means software everywhere, and they love being launch titles. They love putting out.
Is that actually true, or are you kidding?
No, I'm dead
No,
serious.
it used to be, yeah. They don't, it's the same thing with like IGN used to maybe mean Imagine Games Network, but now it doesn't mean anything. Ubisoft, they don't really consider it to mean that anymore, but it did.
I thought it was just French.
Ubiquitous is a pretty French-sounding English word.
So I think technically it's ubiquitous software.
Ubiquitous.
Oh, yes.
We don't. No, I don't want to do that. Anyway, one thing I was talking about with Jonathan that I think is really interesting about this coming console generation, and I think somebody got in my mentions about like saying that it was going to be incremental, and obviously it's going to be a leap forward hardware-wise, but I think just in the sheer nature of how things are with this, transition between consoles, there are a couple things that are different. For starters, this is the first time that we've had like the potential for backwards compatibility since the PS2 to PS3. And there's two key differences between sort of what we're looking at now. One is when you had a PS2 and you switched to PS3, you wanted to bring your game library with you, but that was physical. Whereas this time around, physical games is great, but we all have these giant like digital libraries, or presumably some of us do, which I think there's that sense of if you're getting rid of, if there's no backwards compatibility with digital games, you're like, well, what am I just going to throw those out? And like, I remember, the jump to 360 to Xbox One, like some of those carried over. They were pretty good about kind of making good on that. But like, I don't know, I have like PS3 games I will never play again because they're in a library somewhere that don't exist on that.
Yeah.
The other thing is, of course, games as a service. And I think that, we've seen Assassin's Creed pivot very much that direction. Tom, it's interesting you bring up Destiny because that is I totally forgot that was on last gen. Mm-hmm. And I guess there was some kind of like cross-play account sharing thing going on there. Maybe I can't remember.
I think the idea was that, excuse me, if you started your game on 360 or PS3, you'd be able to bridge your Guardian over to the new gen. Because I think it came out the year after those consoles launched, like the September after.
Right.
So it was one of those things where like, hey, a lot of people still own these old consoles, so we want to make that work for people. But
yeah, I think it's very likely we would see an Assassin's Creed that has the sort of the cross-platform part of it, where it's like, hey, there's going to be faster load times and better graphics and more pixels or whatever in the next version. The NPCs are they all have romance options. There's some extra bell and or whistle.
we also, sorry, go ahead.
on the next gen version, but I think they also want to be like, hey, if you're not ready to make that leap yet, like, don't be afraid to invest time in this right now.
Yeah, you can't ignore 100 million people who have a PS4 on one of the biggest franchises
Yeah.
around. And I do think a thing like launch games seem to play into console gimmicks more than any other games do.
Oh, definitely.
So I expect a lot of these games, it'll be like on Assassin's Creed 4, it'll be like, see what happens when you actually pull the tension back of your Assassin's.
You want to know what it feels like when a hidden blade goes into somebody's like Adam's apple? There's
Now you can.
thorax or whatever.
PS5. Yeah, the cross-gen question, which I do want to get to a little bit more at large, it's a weird one because if you can buy this for PS4, will it play better on PS5? Do I need to buy the PS5 version for it to play better? If I buy it digitally, does it matter?
Yeah, I mean, a big one was GTA, but there was no talk of the next gen version when the last gen version came out.
Yeah.
And everyone got really into GTA Online. And I remember there was a point where they were like, "Hey, if you're going to make that jump, make it now. Like, transfer your stuff. You have a grace period to do so."
Yeah.
That's the thing that I'm waiting for either Sony or Microsoft to announce is just say, hey, to your point about digital, every game you've purchased on PS4 is available right away for you to play on PS5 digitally day one. You can just download it. It's all there. All your save clouds work. And here's upgrades that are available because of PS5. Here are patches that we've been working with Ubisoft and Activision, yada, 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 and to make sure that they run even better, even though at no cost to you beyond the system. Like, if somebody can just commit to that, that would be
a deciding factor for so many people.
Oh, man, it would be huge.
Yeah, especially depending on what the exclusive library is, because at the end of the day, the reason to buy a console at launch and not wait for a price drop in a year or two is whatever's available to you then.
Right.
And if it's not most of the current library you can play, why would you want to upgrade unless it's your job to upgrade?
Yeah.
Anyway, moving on from Assassin's Creed, another one that I think we'll see a cross-gen ecosystem with, Black Ops 5. So there were reports earlier this year that obviously the cycle wouldn't have a Black Ops next year, but there were reports from Kotaku that essentially issues behind the scenes of Call of Duty have caused Treyarch to take over the project. This is all alleged and not confirmed by Activision. And they're then putting the priority into making Black Ops 5 now. Black Ops as a franchise is on Google SEO trends, like as big as Call of Duty. Like people associate the two as their own brands almost. So I think having Black Ops at the beginning of a generation, having Blackout, which became so much more popular than I think a lot of us were expecting at the launch of a generation, saying that ecosystem will be there for you on launch day, makes a lot of sense. Call of Duty has been there for the launch of a lot of generations with Xbox One and PS4. I think it was that funny thing of Ghosts was the launch title. And people would do the comparisons where like in the 360 version, it's two like laundry machines in a room, and then the next gen version, it's like a full office suite. Like it was like night and day visual changes, and so like Call of Duty is no stranger to straddling the generation line. So I expect that to happen this.
Do you think? I mean, I don't want to get ahead of you on this list, but I'm gonna.
Please.
Do you think everything that's going to launch on the PlayStation 5 will be cross-gen?
Like third party maybe, but not first party.
I think anything. It's really hard to say because, like, I do agree that this generation will be more incremental. I think it will be a slower start for a lot of people buying onto this new gen. I think a lot of this stuff has to be because the idea that you'd release a Call of Duty or, as I'll get to in a second, any of the major sports games on only the next, you just can't. You would lose so much money. Investors would be so angry. The player base would be frustrated. Like, it just doesn't make sense to, but at the same time, people need those familiar experiences on their next gen.
But that's exactly what my point is of like, I think you're right. I don't think there's any financial case to be made essentially for anyone to skip PS4 in 2020, right?
Agreed, and you would not want to. You wouldn't want to be that developer that's working on a launch title for like, PlayStation 5 only.
Except for exclusives.
And that's the thing.
But even then, I still think it would be a bit of a,
Sony will throw the money at them. Like, you need to
that's
what I was
true.
gonna say.
Yeah.
The only way it makes financial sense is if it is Sony making it happen, whether that's a first-party game or them paying very heavily for an exclusive to only come to that system, because they're going to need some of that to pull people over, like you're saying, Jonathan. They need those draws, but it's definitely... It's less enticing, I think, for developers to go from PS4 to PS5 than it is to go from PS3 to PS4. And that's maybe what you're hinting at or implying when you say incremental. It's like people can take that out of context and have it mean something more kind of harsh than you think. But it's just that the draw is not quite as much there for a lot of people when the PS4 is still a wonderful system with a lot of lively games and a lot of things coming out.
Yeah.
We've also seen the shift, like, we look at like games as a service as sort of like a bad thing, but it's also stuff like Rainbow Six Siege or Fortnite or Destiny, where they're just like, yeah, we put out a new thing in a box every 2 years, but in the space between those things, we like continue supporting it. And you create a player ecosystem, and you create they're basically like little social networks where it's like you have people who come here all the time and they hang out and they have friends and this is their activity. So like, why would you want to throw that out every time a new thing comes along? And like
Well, and Siege is a great example too, because Siege, they've said that they're going to keep updating that game for, I think it's like 10 years they first announced it. They said it's just going to live. They're not making a Siege 2. They're just going to keep updating this game. And I think Siege is a really good candidate for something like Ubisoft coming out and saying, hey, there's going to be a PS5 version of Siege on launch day, and it's going to have all these such and such and such improvements. Graphically, obviously, because you can't get too much because then you start having a competitive advantage and yada, yada, yada. But I think that's a very good candidate for something like that.
Same with, I think, games like Fortnite and everything else. Like, those have to be there, if not at launch, pretty soon after.
Yeah.
Anyway, moving on from that, one quick one, which I think we can all pretty much agree on, all the sports games, Madden, FIFA, NHL, NBA will probably all be there. One from our own Brian Altano, who can't be with us because he's at a preview event, which we will not speak of at the moment. This came from him, Bloodborne Remastered. And his reasoning here...
I love it. I love it.
The reasoning here is, weirdly, Bloodborne is one of the only games, like, especially exclusive, to not get a PS4 Pro upgrade patch. Like, it didn't get one in the same way other first-party games did that allowed it to play more smoothly on a PS4 Pro, have all the bells and whistles that a Pro gives you, compared to a launch PS4. And it weirdly is neglected in that sense, even though that game is beloved and it's still talked about all the time. And Sony is well aware of the fandom of it. So doing a Bloodborne Remastered would, one, get you a really big name that everyone loves, give people a reason to pick it up again, which is always the big reason when you do a remaster. And it's probably not as big a lift as, say, working on Bloodborne 2.
See, I was going to say I'd love to see Bloodborne 2 as a launch title.
Do you think we will?
No, not realistically. But that's definitely on my wish list, because Bloodborne is one of those games where everyone's just like, oh, come on, like, please give us a sequel. It's my game of all time. Like, I want more. I will be, with that said, I will be extremely satisfied with a Bloodborne remastered. And I would actually get a PlayStation 5 just for that. Like, I know that's terrible. It's not like I'm swimming in money or anything. It's just like the idea of what that game will look like on a PlayStation 5 makes me want to weep.
I'm definitely not the right person for that, because I still haven't finished the regular version. But if I'm like, I keep being like, I wonder when I'll finish that. Will I have children by then? Like, who knows? Very possibly. Will Avatar 2 be out? Who knows? But like, I'm sort of chipping away at it and taking my time with it. And if they come out and they're like, hey, we're putting out a new, better version, I'll be like, can I bring my save file? And they'll be like, no. And I'll be like, no, I don't want to fight that horse again.
But like, Brian's right insofar as like that is a real no-brainer. It wouldn't be, I say this with very little understanding of technology.
You save as .ps5 and it's good to go.
yeah, exactly. It wouldn't be as massive.
You just frighten up the graphics on level 4.
JPEG large. It wouldn't be as massive a lift as Bloodborne 2, of course. But it would be a really well-regarded name. I would love to see that as a launch title. It'd
be very interesting. I think it makes sense, and we'll get into more Sony exclusive stuff now as we go through the list. One brief thing I want to mention, I'll kind of sandwich this. We know PSVR will still be supported on PS5. They're not announcing plans for a PSVR 2, it looks like right now, for launch. I assume that's going to probably come a year or two in. But I still think you need to give a reason for people to want to play PSVR on PS5. And my two guesses would be, and obviously they'd be cross-gen, Astrobot 2, and a new PSVR game, the first by Insomniac as a first party for PSVR. Insomniac has a big history with VR, some really great stuff that they've made for other VR headsets. Astrobot is one of, if not the most beloved PSVR game. Those are two really easy wins to say, hey, they're available to play on PS4, but if you play them on PS5, they have X better graphics, they have X different controls, they do X, Y, and Z with the new bells and whistles we have at this console. It just feels like a smart way to entice people a little bit more. I don't think they'd be console sellers for anyone, but as an additional thing.
And also just, yeah, like it's really important that Sony is still supporting PSVR because it is such a investment for so many players.
Yeah.
And I would hate it, especially in this point of the PlayStation VR's life cycle, for it to be replaced with some better version.
Yeah.
Like we still need more for that system.
Well, also it's worth pointing out that an upgrade to the hardware behind a PSVR headset is an upgrade to PSVR, right? If you have a better computer, you can do better things with a Vive or an Oculus Rift, and it's the same here, where the physical limitations of the PSVR, like you're still going to have the same viewing angle, you're still going to have the same resolution in the headset, you're going to have the same PlayStation Move controllers for whatever games use those, but you could have games that are running better, like the actual graphics could be more dense, have more things in them, be more complex.
Yep.
Just from upgrading to a PS5 with the same headset, you actually could conceivably get a jump in the quality of game. And the quality of VR experience in general.
Absolutely. Moving on from that, though, did want to get to some of the bigger swings I'm taking. Probably completely wrong.
Yeah, those are the most fun.
I think we're either going to get, because I do think you need marquee Sony franchises at launch if you want people to buy this thing, Horizon 1 Dawn, the sequel to Horizon Zero Dawn, or a new Uncharted. So my two reasons for that, Horizon Zero Dawn, in terms of the big PS4 games we're waiting on sequels for, Horizon, God of War, Spider-Man, it's the one that was earliest to be released of all of those. Obviously, Guerrilla has like a very strong base already with the first game, and I don't think 2 will necessarily be a game where they radically throw out the formula. But they are powerhouses when it comes to showing hardware off as a studio, Guerrilla, and they were at the launch of the PS4 with Killzone. I don't think they're going to go back to the Killzone well as a studio right now. Maybe that might be the alternative, but I do think we'll see Guerrilla. Yeah, I think they would do something, maybe even if it's like an in-between game, like a shorter Horizon experience.
Yeah, I think
bridges the gap.
I think in terms of the way that Guerrilla operates as a studio, I think everything changed with Horizon Zero Dawn. I think it was very much like, okay, this is what we've traditionally done, and now we are going to take a massive risk. And it did so well for them that I don't see them going back. With that said, I also really don't want a full-length Horizon Zero Dawn game to come out at launch, just because I think that one of the things that was so magnificent about that game was truly the technology behind it, the sort of the graphical prowess, that world that they were able to build. And not that I'm not saying that it wouldn't be spectacular as a launch title, but I want it to sort of be in the mid life cycle of the PlayStation 5, where it's like everything is just like every piece of that game is singing at the height of the technology. You know what I mean? I know that's like a really clumsy way to explain it, but like I want it to, I want there to be a lot of groundwork done on the PlayStation 5 first before that game comes out. For sure.
That's an interesting one, because how do you upgrade that? Like, how do you kick that up a notch? Like, you don't want to...
More NPCs.
I mean, I think that they're probably throwing some multiplayer angle or flying machines.
There's only the one major bird type,
They were
right?
flying...
But you
robots.
couldn't fly.
No, you could not fly.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
So like like
mountable flying robots.
No, I think that if they were like,
Aloy
hey,
gets
now
into
it's
a little plane.
Horizon with friends or whatever, I think that's very possible.
I hope it's called Horizon with Friends.
Yeah.
The other take on that of just like a recognizable thing, Uncharted, I think Lost Legacy proved you don't, one, need to do a Uncharted game with Nathan Drake in it. 2, it can be slightly smaller but still ambitious and really fun. And 3, even if Naughty Dog is focused on Last of Us and post-Last of Us support and probably whatever new thing they're working on after that, it doesn't mean someone else can't take the reins with Uncharted. There have been rumors, whether or not they're true, that other studios are helping to continue the legacy of Uncharted and move it forward. And so it wouldn't shock me to be like, Sony wants to have something that everyone loves who plays PlayStation games, and Uncharted is one of those games. And so to have that there at launch in some capacity is not a bad way to get people to buy it, especially if you can't get it on PS4. Just a guess. I don't know. We'll see.
I kind of don't have anything to say about that because I think that's a pretty good case you just laid out there.
Oh, thank you. That's how conversational. Moving on from that, the last one I do want to bring up before getting into your guys' is a game from WB. My two big guesses would be Batman
Or Space Jam 2.
or Space
The
Jam 2,
official
the game.
movie novelization, the game.
It's a visual
website.
novel.
Yeah.
Batman or Harry Potter. There was that leaked Harry Potter RPG a year ago. Haven't heard a word about it since. WB still hasn't even confirmed it's real, which seems crazy. If that game is really that long in production, I don't see why it wouldn't be coming to next gen. Probably cross gen, but I wouldn't be surprised if it also comes to PS5 as well. Similarly, Batman Arkham. Why not have a Batman game for next gen?
Arkham damn near killed him. I'm sorry. I don't know why.
I expect that from Lucy, not from you.
God.
Anyway, I just think WB has been so quiet on that
Yeah.
AAA front. They've been focusing on Mortal Kombat and Lego recently, and they have so many big franchises. Use them, like put something out.
Yeah, I think that like Arkham could be a good launch title, especially because it's WB Montreal, right?
That's we assume they still haven't even.
Well,
said
they hinted at it
that's
recently.
Who's hinting Batman?
that was weird, right?
Yeah,
so weird.
and just nothing happened.
The
My
hell was
theory
that?
Is that they're just going to do a cryptic Batman tweet once a month for the next 3 years and never release a game.
Just have everyone frothing every single time they do it.
Yep.
I'm not like, even though I love the idea of, this Batman Court of Owls kind of game that was hinted at, I also like it's not Rocksteady. So like for me, it's like, yeah, cool. Have WB Montreal make a Batman game. I know that this is really rude because like I do have faith. It's just that, Arkham Origins was what it was. It wasn't part of
As
that
good. Yeah.
magnificent trilogy. So yeah, why not? I think that sounds great. I would be all in.
We shall see. I hope some of those games will come out. I have a feeling at least half of those are totally wrong. But do want to do some rapid fire ones before I go to you guys for any other guesses. These all come from the Podcast Beyond Facebook group, which is facebook.com/group/Podcast Beyond. I asked everyone in there one game they want to see at the launch of PS5 and one game they think they will see at the launch. Patrick said he wants The Order 1993.
Hell yes.
The Order 1990, not like 1873 or like,
I love it.
The year after 1867 or whatever. 1993. He thinks we will get Knack the Third.
I appreciate it being Knack the Third.
Knack the Third, yeah. It takes the Shrek nomenclature.
It's just slightly irritating enough.
Yeah.
Knack the Third.
It's also Saints Row the Fourth, right? Or
Oh,
they
yeah.
do
The Saints Row the
third?
Third
The
also,
third?
yeah.
Okay, they did that too.
Several people, including Ulysses and Buddy, both said they expect the Horizon Zero Dawn sequel at launch. Ulysses wants a Resistance Trilogy remaster, and Buddy said he wanted a PlayStation All-Stars sequel.
Well,
Do you?
yeah.
Not to be mean. If you want that, that's great.
You can want that.
Ken said they want a new MotorStorm, but they expect a new Ratchet and Clank. You'd be down for a new MotorStorm?
Sorry, I love MotorStorm. I love those trucks that go so fast they blow up. Give me more of those trucks. Try not to swear about MotorStorm. It's hard. I love those trucks.
Yair said he wants Summoner 3 or a Summoner remake. I think you're the only person who put that, so
Wow.
awesome. Thinks we will get NBA 2K21. Sad face.
I mean, it's a safe bet.
Yeah. Let's see what else we have here. James wants next Ratchet and Clank game. We'll see Horizon 2. We got a lot of those.
That would make everyone real mad if they made Ratchet and Knack.
Combine the universes.
Together at last.
The crossover you never knew you needed.
The biggest ones that I've seen over and over have been Horizon Zero Dawn sequel and a Ratchet and Clank sequel.
Okay.
I do feel like Ratchet and Clank, if it comes out, probably could come out on PS4 also. It feels like they put so much effort into making that new reboot for PS4. It can't hurt to also put that on PS4.
Yep.
But having that as an exclusive, that said, would be nice to have. But from you guys, before we move on topic-wise, what is a game you want or think we will see at launch that we have not mentioned or have mentioned?
All right, I just came up with another one just then. So this definitely will not happen because it would be physically impossible. So this is definitely a wish. But I would actually really like a Days Gone 2 on
What kind of game are you trying to play over here?
Listen,
You try to kill that game with your words.
listen to me. So the thing is about Days Gone is that I thought that like there were some great ideas in that game, and there was buried under layers of I'm not going to say what I want to say. Buried under layers of not so good stuff.
Of freaker bodies.
Of freaker bodies. There were some really good ideas, and I think that it felt very half baked. But like it didn't feel like a total misfire. Like it felt like it wasn't fully realized. And so I would love to see a Days Gone 2. I mean, it doesn't have to be a launch title. I would just eventually love to see a Days Gone 2 where those ideas, those great ideas that sort of formed, you know, a lot of the sort of core threads of that game were more properly realized on a beefier system.
And like on that note, I think that's one of those games where it's the like Assassin's Creed syndrome, where Assassin's Creed 2 was such a step up. But in terms of like PS4 exclusives, I tweeted about this before the weekend, but I was like, hey, who would want an Order sequel?
Yeah.
That is another game where it has a lot of really good ideas in it. It sets up such cool story stuff. The world is interesting. The lore is great.
Definitely.
And then it just wasn't that great of a game to play.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for me, I think the thing with Days Gone is it does have so many like interesting ideas.
It's got some great ingredients. It just didn't. It was just a bit of a flop on the eating.
Like, yeah, a flop on the eating, Lucy O'Brien.
But you know what I mean?
2019.
Like, not a flop.
It didn't all come
what,
together.
What did I
That's a
call?
terrible series of words.
I sort of hate
Flop
myself.
on the eating.
What? How did I put those words together?
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode.
But it was like, you know, it was okay. It was fine. It was sort of like the kind of meal afterwards you were like, oh, like I sort of hate myself for eating that, but like I'm full.
I mean, the time I spent with it struck me as like if you were making a stew and you couldn't quite get the taste right, so you kept adding more ingredients, and in the end you had like a large pot of something that wasn't really great, like had a lot of
like just heaps of salt.
Yeah, or
Like just heaps of salt, like
And then you flop
You just keep
like
trying to scale everything up. Anyway,
Flop
people
it on
are.
the
I can
table for
hear people
eating.
getting mad at us for speaking ill of that game, but no, seriously, like video game sequels are frequently better than their predecessors. Like
That's right, and we're so fortunate in that regard that like, and especially for a game that did as well as Days Gone, you know, it does strike me as being like a no-brainer for a sequel. So why not?
I like the direction they're going with all the DLC support. With
Yeah.
we got golf carts and jumps and stuff. Like, I know that there's a lot of like gritty bad boys out there who wouldn't want to hear this, but get silly.
Yeah.
Get nuts there.
One of the biggest problems for that game was I think how super serious its story beats could be. And it didn't really feel to give it much personality. So yeah, I would love them to play that up in the sequel. I think we will get one at some point. Max, anything else that we haven't named?
I mean, I love the Order thing. I don't know what's going on with Metal Gear. I mean, there's probably not much. There would definitely be an ethical dilemma of do I give Konami money for a remaster of a video game that does not have Kojima's name on it? Like, who knows? But I mean, if they were like, we've been muttering about that Blue Point project that's apparently very ambitious and huge. And if I don't know, like maybe this is a long shot, but maybe Sony was like, "Hey, Konami, realistically, are you going to do anything with that Metal Gear license?" And if they just bought it and scooped it up and made if they made it a PlayStation exclusive, again, just
Produced by Kojima Productions.
I don't know. They're buddied up with him. Like maybe they're like, hey man, when you're done with that baby nonsense, why don't you come over here and make Snake come back again?
They just made a Silent Hill slot machine, so I think they both A, are not doing anything with Metal Gear, and B, will never give up the Metal Gear license.
Yeah.
They turned it into slot machines.
Well, it's a
Slots and
pachinko, yeah.
Yep.
Nothing says silence like the sound of a slot machine.
Tom, what PS5 game would you want to see at launch?
I have no good answers for this.
All right, get off the show.
I had one that I'd love to see, but I know won't happen, which is I'd love for them to at least around launch announce Baldur's Gate 3 for PS4 or PS5.
It's just coming to PC right now,
It's
right?
currently only its plans are PC, but Larian, the developers of Divinity Original Sin who are making it, have been extraordinarily good about bringing Divinity Original Sin 1 and 2 to consoles with like really good controller support.
Isn't that a Stadia launched game? Or
It's not. I think they're
Not
doing
launched,
something
but
with Stadia, but
they announced
not like,
it at-
it's not
yeah.
like an exclusive to Stadia or anything like that. I'd love to see some, and this is just the PC person in me coming out, but I'd love to see some like non-console traditional stuff throwing their support towards PS5. I think that would be really, really cool to have Larian say, hey, you know what, we're still working on this for PC, but like it's going to launch first on PS5 or something like that. I think I that would make me really, really happy to see that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a lot about the launch of the PS5 and the launch window that we can only guess at right now. So obviously, throughout the next year, we will be talking a lot leading up to the PS5 launch on IGN, on Beyond, on all the platforms we exist on, Snapchat, Friendster, TikTok, whatnot. So anyway, moving on from that, I do want to talk about the PS5. I wanted to ask you all one thing, and this starts with a question from a listener who wrote into beyond@ign.com, which you can write into with your questions, memory card stories, and everything else you want to say about the show, and we'll read that stuff on the show, unless it's real mean. Anyway, Urkon wrote in, I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly, and said, with the PlayStation 5 being officially announced, that he wrote it on the day it was announced, the title of the system. What does this mean for games being released in 2020? Would you anticipate a decline in PS4 software sales as people would rather wait to play these games on the new hardware, or even remastered, upgraded versions dedicated specifically for the PS5? And I want to talk kind of at large. We touched on it a bit with some of the like cross-gen ideas, but do we think the transition is going to be strange going to PS5? Like this is, we're moving generations in a way that we haven't before, with how much people have invested in specific games, in specific libraries, and the fact that we know those things can carry over in a way they haven't been able to before, as easily and as immediately. So just to start off the bat, like, are you guys feeling like we need to jump onto the PS5 next year? Like, have you seen enough to want to be like, yep, it's time to go for PS5? No.
I mean, no, but, all we've got to go with so far are very dry numbers and words. Like, we haven't actually seen anything in action, and I think that's going to change a lot of people's minds, especially when it comes to things like loading times and stuff like that. Like, for me, that's going to be a big deal breaker. I forget what it was. Like, the Spider-Man demo that was described in the Wired interview, where it was like something that took 15 seconds to load before just happened in an instant.
Under a second.
That for me is a massive draw card. So if I see that in action, I'm going to be very seduced.
Would, for you guys, because Max, you were shaking your head like not so much ready for PS5.
I have been saying for the last 3 years that I'm finally going to upgrade to 4K, and I swear I'm going to do it this year and finally understand what the PS4 Pro is capable of on my television screen.
Oh my God, Max. I downgraded. So I had a 4K TV in Australia, and it was gorgeous. And when I moved over here, I had to, leave it behind. And now I've got your TV from your den.
Did I give you a TV?
Yeah, you did.
Oh, okay,
I bought it
cool.
off you.
Give it or take it.
But it's like, oh, wow. It's like touching God and then, it crashing down to earth.
Sorry, the TV I have sucks.
Thank you very much for your television. I'm very grateful.
No, I don't know. That was, I don't know. Somebody who was like crashing with us, like left their TV, and I was like, oh, this is like 3 inches big. Oh, it's so much sort of clearer. And it's like, I still need to get a 4K TV. Again, like the graphics are only going to my eyes are going too. I need to wear glasses. Like it's reaching a point where I'm just sort of like, I don't know. It's okay. I'm fine. It loads fast enough. It's cool. I don't know what they're going to do with next gen stuff that just makes me go, oh, and it's like there will totally be something because I'm pathetic and I will inevitably be like, oh, that's shiny, or oh, the controller is shaped cooler. Like there's that thing that switches on where you're like, ooh, that's newer, and it's in the same way that you'll see like a new version of a thing you already have, and you're like, oh, mine is covered in dust and I hate it. Like
I haven't used it for 7 years, but I want the new version.
I want to upgrade my PSVR because I have the old one that you have to plug the headphones into the dongle on the cord as opposed to the back of the neck or whatever. And I'm like, that other one's cooler. Like it's so stupid. And on some level, I'm like, no, we totally don't need because we're at this wonderful sweet spot in this generation where developers have had so much time to get used to this current hardware. Even the hardware manufacturers have given it a little bit of an extra boost with the PS4 Pro and the One X, and there's ongoing support for games, and there's 8K doesn't. I don't care about that. I guess load times are cool. They're going to do new stuff with clouds probably. I don't want another subscription service. I just want to see I want the games that are coming out next year. They're there's such a wonderful history of some of the best games ever coming out at the tail end of a hardware life cycle.
Well, we recently compared 2013 to what's coming up next year.
2020 is nuts.
They're very comparable in terms of just how stacked they are.
And we don't even have what next gen games are going to be.
Yeah.
And that's to the point, or to the question, I feel like that happens sort of that lull between when a console is announced and a console is released is always palpable to a certain extent. Definitely console sales go down. People stop buying PS4s in anticipation of PS5s. But like you said, I think that there's a reason that every major game you've been excited for the last year and a half is coming out in the spring of 2020, right? Because all of these games are trying to just land so that they don't have to be cross-gen, so that they can come out right there before that hits, just blow off 2020 and then or blow up 2020, and then when the new consoles come in later, then that will sort of restart.
Here's a question for you. When are we going to see GTA 6?
Yeah.
Never.
Well, we
That's
saw
a big one.
GTA 5 in 2013, right? Like
Yep.
it was
And it sold incredibly well, and
Gangbusters.
the tail, like, you wait until there's a massive group of people who have your console and you release something they care about, and then you sell it to them again when the new thing comes out and they want to have, peyote and cats walking around.
I don't
In
think
the game
we're-
or
A little bit of both.
Okay,
but I was speaking about GTA specifically.
I don't think we're anything closer than 2 to 3 years away from a GTA 6.
Yeah, I agree.
I think that Red Dead was their full attention, and they're going to need to switch gears and then do whatever they do, probably terrible crunch to pump that out. I think that Red Dead was the reason we haven't seen anything about GTA 6 is because of Red Dead.
And Red Dead is still such a massive focus for
Right.
that team.
they're still
with
pushing
Red Dead Online.
Yeah,
Yeah.
online, and then the PC port of it. I'm trying to pull up a list just to see in between games, but the Wikipedia list of Rockstar games also includes every re-release, so it's going to be hard for me to find specific games.
Wait, what was that one? Was it Valentine? Grand Theft Auto Online, Be My
My
Valentine?
Valentine.
This wiki list is muddled.
You should go to the IGN wikis for more. But yeah, no, I did want to just circle back a little bit before we get to some memory card stuff of that, the weird cross-gen nature of this gen versus last gen, because we are at a point where people can just keep playing Fortnite. They can play, Max, you and I talked about this, Fortnite on their phones. Like, you don't need to play Fortnite on PS5 to have a good experience with it. And when dozens of millions of people are playing it, how do you get people to buy into these launch games? Like, do you think we're really going to see a big push for exclusive hardware, exclusive software, exclusive features? Like, what's going to be the thing that they do to push PS5 at launch to get people to not just stick with their systems?
Look,
Pure
we're not
science.
marketers, Jonathan.
I know,
Why are you
but
asking
speculate.
us?
Moving on, anyway.
It's a hard question, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I think that the reason there's partly this sort of silence is because it's probably one Sony's thinking about right now too. I don't think that, like you said, this is a gen switch that is sort of unprecedented in how much people are still attached to the thing that is before.
Yeah.
And it's new territory in terms of how do they do this? How do they convince people? Because right now their strategy seems to be cryptic hardware announcements of very specific things through Wired. No shade at Wired, just like it's I don't think they know the answer yet either. And they seem to be experimenting and trying different things, and I don't know.
Like, in the beginning of next year on PS4, you're going to be able to play The Last of Us Part 2, Watch Dogs Legion, Doom Eternal, Gods and Monsters, Final Fantasy VII Remake, Cyberpunk 2077.
Goodness.
Things that don't have release date, or Marvel's Avengers as well. Things
Watch
that don't
Dogs
have
Legion.
Watch Dogs. Things that don't have release dates, like Persona 5, The Royal, and whatever else gets announced in the next few months. But like, there's so much still to come on PS4.
But remember, when the PS5 launches, all of those games shut off forever.
Oh yes, yeah, you're
Yeah.
right.
So-
I forgot about that
Silly
whole
me.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, good luck if you own a PS4 in the fall of 2020. But yeah, it's going to be a very interesting year to watch. And I think seeing how the companies have been revealing information so far, it has been a very slow, quiet trickle that I think is really going to escalate in the next few months. And it'll be very exciting to cover on the show. But before we wrap up everything beyond this week, did want to do some memory card. The right sound effect.
What instrument was that? That noise, that little flute.
It was a bandana being played in the wind.
Oh,
What?
is that you can do that?
Maybe.
That like when you put like a piece of grass between your fingers and
Yeah,
make a
and
rooster
it makes a
sound, but
noise.
you have to do
Yeah.
a bandana. Okay.
Anyway, Memory Card is our weekly segment where you, the viewers and listeners at home, write in with your funny, weird, wacky, sad, happy stories of your gaming life, and we read them on the show. This week, because we were talking so much about the PS5 launch, I reached out to everyone on Twitter and asked for your memories of the PS4 launch. And so I do want to get to any memories you might all have of the PS4 launch. Did want to get to one from IGN's former employee, Mitch Dyer, who wrote in.
Ooh.
Whoa,
He's not here.
I love you, Mitch.
harsh.
Mitch said, I think we stacked all of our PlayStations that got shipped to the office on launch day for a photo. Maybe Andrew Goldfarb or Greg Miller still have it somewhere. Did we do an article? It ruled. Andrew replied with an image I unfortunately can't pull up on the show at this moment as we're recording, but it's Andrew lying on a bunch of Amazon boxes like the dude in Breaking Bad Season 5.
Ah, nice.
Anyway, moving on from that, there is an article actually on IGN where you can go read about them unboxing everything. Tom Marks wrote in and said,
is a
I
mistake.
convinced
Don't do
my
this to me."
parents to pay for half of it because then I was buying the game half and they were buying the Blu-ray player half. Tom, how old were you when the PS4 came out?
I don't remember. I thought you said the PS3. It was a mistake, Jonathan.
yeah, I was like, what are you are you like a 12-year-old boy?
You put yourself on blast when you wrote that on
That's
Twitter, my
really
friend.
cute. Oh, I want to ruffle your hair.
Simon Carty from the IGN UK office, and I promise this isn't all just IGN employees, wrote, I couldn't get one and waited miserably every day until I could.
Aw.
Aaron wrote in and said, I was a broke college student going through a rough time around the PS4's launch. Not only could I not afford one, I also wasn't feeling very motivated. The morning after launch day, I woke up to a box on my bed with a note that read, you deserve this more than you know, Mom. It turns out my mom spent the entire day before looking for one she could buy. She drove miles from city to city trying to find one with no luck. In a last-ditch effort, she visited a local mom and pop shop here in Long Beach called Gameplay, and they had 2 left in stock.
Yay! That's such a nice story.
It's a very sweet story. Solid Slug, Titan shoulder pads,
Ew.
wrote in and said, I took the day off work to play it. Delivery driver never landed till what would have been 2 hours after my shift ended. Then the dreaded install of Killzone and Battlefield 4.
Yo, that's the thing we all have to prepare ourselves for now is you get a new console and you're excited to play it, and then you do 5 hours of updates and don't actually play it.
Yeah. Yeah.
At Just Click It, because everyone has Halloween names, so I'm not going to read all those, said, my roommates at the time had a race to see who could get theirs first. I bought mine at Walmart, and they bought and went right across the street to GameStop. They arrived 20 minutes after me. We then started them and proceeded to update for over an hour. Needless to say, we all lost that day. Do any of you, as I look for a couple more stories, do any of you have memories of the PS4 launch? Did you buy one on launch day? Did you wait after, Tom? I know your PS4 came much later.
Yeah, no, I didn't buy a PS4 until the Pro, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was much later. I was just using my PS3 mainly for a lot of things, and then I sort of drifted towards PC for a long time and came back to PS4, and I'm really glad I did, but I just remember people, and this is not new to, or unique to the PS4, but I remember people doing those videos of like buying one and then going to the back of the line and smashing it in front of everybody. That's what sticks out in my
Wow,
memory.
that's
I hate
terrible.
Yeah.
That's one of the worst things I've ever heard.
Internet videos, not me seeing that.
I went to the midnight launch on the GameStop on Market Street. Rest in peace. That was, and it was weird because it wasn't really. That was sort of in the days of people pre-ordering stuff online, and there weren't that many people there. It was kind of like low key. I think I just started working at Destructoid like full time and doing video stuff for them, and I was like, I'll shoot some stuff at the. We just like went and tried to shoot videos, but it was like maybe 11 people there or something. So I was like, this isn't really that exciting. This isn't what people expect from midnight launch, and I didn't buy one that day. I think I was like, well, there's nothing really there yet. There's nothing really grabbing me, and there was a lot of stuff. I'd like previewed a ton of things and covered them all, and I was like, there's gonna be cool stuff, but it's not out yet. And then I think I just got bored enough and was like, all right, screw it. And I took like a literal garbage bag full of other gaming peripherals and nonsense and just took it back to that same GameStop and was like, please take my Kinect. Take my 7 U-Draw tablets I got at some THQ event. Rest in peace.
For me, the PS4, I was living in New York at the time, and it was coming out. It was very cold since it was November, and they were doing a launch event like a day or two before launch. somewhere downtown, you basically had to go in line. You couldn't pre-order it at this event. It was just stand in line, and the first X hundred people will get PS4s. So I went to go do that. Two of my friends, I was working at my college newspaper at the time, two of my friends from the newspaper came with me to stand in line, freezing cold. We were in line for upwards of 3 hours, from at least like 8 p.m. until at least 11 p.m. The line was slowly getting forward, but there were at least another 200 people in front of us. And there was a lot of chatter going on all in the line, people from the back of the line talking to the front of like, will we get a PS4? Will this happen? And we were right around the point in the line where it was like a big maybe. Like it was probably within like 40 to 50 units of whether or not we were going to get one. And the other problem was my friend who came with us, he came on a whim. He wasn't wearing socks, and it was sub-freezing temperatures in New York.
Interesting decision.
And
games aren't worth that.
He was just there for fun. He doesn't even really play video games.
Shoes?
He was wearing shoes, but not socks.
What a sick man. Is he okay?
He's good. Yeah, he's having a thriving career. He's
better
doing well.
now?
He's doing very well.
Good.
But anyway, he came with us. His feet were freezing, and I was worried about frostbite for him. And I also didn't want to stand in line by myself because I had class at 8 a.m. the next day. So after standing in line for 4 hours, we left, and I didn't get a PS4. Ooh. Immediately went home, went onto Amazon, and was able to buy one.
That's crazy.
Came 2 days later, but the thing about it was I waited home that day for it. So it was like continued problems. I waited home that day. It was taking forever, still being on the way, still being shipped. At like 5:55 p.m. at my apartment building, I was there. It said failed to deliver. No one was available to pick it up. And so you can pick it up at the local UPS shipping center, but the only UPS shipping center downtown for me was all the way across town. I was living on 1st. It was over on 12th, so essentially the entire width of New York City. So I had to go over there at 8 p.m. They're like, here's a number. We'll call you when it's ready. There were like 4 other people in there. It took 2 hours of waiting.
Wow, that is so painful.
For them to...
Nightmare.
Then I went home and played the PS4 finally, and it was fun because I had Resogun. But yeah, that was quite a struggle. To
You know
get a
what?
PS4.
I've just been thinking this whole time as everyone's been talking. I do not remember getting a PS4 for the first time. I remember getting a PlayStation 4 Pro. I remember getting a PS3, PS2, PS1. I remember getting a Vita. I do not remember getting a PlayStation 4. I got one. I didn't get it at launch. I got it like maybe 2 months after launch. I have not. It was clearly such an unspectacular sale that I don't remember it.
Yeah.
I've got nothing. Sorry, PlayStation 4. I love the console.
You just can't remember when it came into your life.
Can't remember actually buying it.
Well, Max is right. Midnight launches are not what they used to be, man.
Yeah.
They suck.
They used to be these events.
I mean, why would you got to go out in the cold, and you could also just get it brought to your house, and you make up an excuse to not go to work where you're like, oh yeah, my cat has an ear infection, and you're really just waiting for an Amazon delivery.
You know what was worse than going to a midnight launch is working a midnight launch. So I worked in the midnight launch for the PlayStation 3 and for the first expansion for WoW. I was working at EB Games in Melbourne.
Whoa.
And I remember it was so, so miserable. And I remember, I was working in a mall at the time. We shut the thing down, and like there was this guy, and we'd emptied the till, so everything was locked away, and he wanted this copy of Burning Crusade or whatever. And I was like, I'm so sorry. We're closed. There's nothing we can do. And he burst into tears, and I was just like, I'm never doing another one of these.
Oh no.
Oh my God.
Never, ever.
Speaking of working a midnight launch, a couple other stories to wrap these up from fans on Twitter. Brittany wrote in and said, I was pregnant and was with my husband for a midnight launch. I kept having to go pee, but luckily I worked for the Best Buy we were at, so I didn't have a problem with them letting me in and out. Otherwise, that would have been a long night. One final long story from Angel. Angel wrote in and said, I live in Mexico, so when the PS4 came out, it was quite expensive for us. There was this person who bought a bunch of consoles and resold them over here for a much lower price. It was all legit. He gave me the console with its ticket and a bill from Best Buy in California. Even though I knew it sounded kind of fishy, I took the risk. So I was the first one among my friends and family to get a PS4. This was just a few days after the launch. So I organized a launch party sort of thing. I invited friends, my brother, and a couple of cousins over. When everyone had arrived and it was all settled, we unboxed the thing together. It was all there. We passed around the controller to feel it for the first time, and the same for the console. I bought Killzone Shadowfall as my first PS4 game, so we opened that as well. Everything was going all right until I plugged it in, and oh, the horror, it didn't want to turn on at all. You could just see the blue light for a few seconds and hear the beeping sound, and then nothing. So after trying many things like plugging it in different places and seeing that it was all useless, we had to play some PS3 games that afternoon. I can't describe the shame I felt for not being able to make it work after being so cocky with the people there about my bright new console. I contacted the guy who sold it to me, and he just said to contact Sony directly. I was afraid they wouldn't do anything since the console was bought in the US store, but fortunately, they picked up the console with no problem and returned it home a few days later, working like a charm. It's still to this day something my friends make fun of me for, but I remember it like a teaching lesson and kind of funny story.
Cute.
I like that.
Yeah, I love that.
Nice.
Yeah.
I mean, the key thing about new hardware is that it's really, really boring if you don't have any games.
It's true.
Or if it doesn't turn on, you know? But I love that thing where you like get the new thing, like, yeah, cool, and you take it out of the box and you're like, yeah, it's a controller. Sure wish I was playing the new game on there. You know?
My Xbox One, the first Xbox One I got was faulty. I had to take it back. And that was my first console of this generation. Yeah, it was like very disappointing.
Yeah.
Remember it was like that disk drive problem? It was like, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had that.
Can't wait to find out what the PS5 and Xbox 2 do wrong when they launch. Before we wrap up quickly, just want to mention what we're playing. Tom, I will get to you in a second because you have two very relevant games to mention that are coming out this week that you're not playing currently but have played in Love and Exalt. Max, have you been playing anything? Been a bit quiet?
Fighting that damn spider in Bloodborne.
Yeah, still making
I
it through.
hate him. It's her. It's awful.
Tune in next week for Max's continued report about Bloodborne. Lucy, have you been playing anything? Just living a quiet life?
Living a quiet life.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Tom, 2 games are coming out this week for PS4.
It's a very Tom week.
You have loved and won't shut up about because they came to PC and other consoles first. Ooh, look at me. I'm Tom.
Not the second one, not Obra Dinn.
No, but Outer Wilds did.
Yes.
So anyway, Outer Wilds and The Return of Obra Dinn are both coming to PS4 this week.
Yes!
Tom, tell us briefly why people out there should play these games if they haven't.
The Return of the Obra Dinn
So good.
was probably my favorite sort of mystery adventure detective game of 2018, and Outer Wilds is my favorite mystery detective adventure game of 2019, and they are both coming out this week on PS4. They're just these phenomenal atmospheric adventure games where Obra Dinn is it's one bit, they say, so there's only ever black or one color on the screen at once, and that sounds really annoying, but it's actually pretty cool to look at. It gave Sam Claiborne a headache, but it...
Yeah, I was so surprised because I loved it.
Yeah, the
visually.
art style is great, and basically what you're doing is you go onto a boat that has rolled into shore after being missing like for 3 years at sea, and you're not trying to solve the mystery of that. You're literally an insurance evaluator, and so you just have to go around. You have a magic, I can't remember what it's called, like a magic compass basically that lets you relive the moment someone died. And what you have is you walk up to their corpse and you have a black screen where you can hear all of the audio that plays for like maybe 30 seconds before they die. And then you hear a bang or a boom or a stab or a scream or whatever killed them. And it freezes and everything comes into view and you can see the exact moment they were killed. And everything else is silent, everything else is frozen, and you have to look around and see, like, okay, and sometimes it's really clear, sometimes you have a person who's just stabbing them, and you're like, oh, okay, they got stabbed.
Like that, that rewind thing is quite common in video games, but I can't express enough how stylishly it's done in this game, and also how clever the puzzles are.
Yeah, and so the whole game is about going around and finding, you have a ledger of the entire crew, and you have to go through and say, this person was killed this way by this person, or by this monster, or whatever it is. And it's just wonderful. It is absolutely one of my favorite games I've played in years.
I need to play that.
It's so good. You'll love it.
Yeah.
The flip of this...
Also, I just want to point out, I think it's hilarious that a black and white game would give Sam Claiborne a headache when he repairs pinball machines for a living, which are sarcophaguses that sound like broken fire engines.
The other game that's coming out this week that I wanted to shout out was not the Outer Wilds, just Outer Wilds.
Not the Outer Worlds.
The Outer Worlds is
Comes
the
out
RPG
next week.
coming by Obsidian.
What about the Outer Wilds?
Outer Wilds is a space game that's been out a bit on other platforms where it's a space exploration game where you fly out into it's all handcrafted, like a handcrafted solar system of, I think it's like 6 or 7 planets. And you just can fly to any of them. And I won't spoil the why, but the whole game is on a 20-minute loop, roughly 20 minutes. Every 20 minutes, it resets and you wake up at the beginning of the game. And you have to go out and keep solving these mysteries, and there's nothing in the game that you like. There's no leveling up, there's no upgrades. Everything is just, you'll read these stories and you'll find these clues that lead you to another place, and then once you've covered something, you don't have to go back there usually, and you just have to try to unravel the story of like what's happening and why it's happening and try to get through it. And it's very, very self-driven, but the best way I saw it put, and this might not be as well with a PlayStation audience, but somebody said it was like taking that sort of wow moment that you have if you played Breath of the Wild, where you see a dragon for the first time, where you're like, oh my God.
And it's just off in the distance, and it's
and you're like, I can't believe this is in this game. It's that made into a game. So like every planet you go to has 5 of those moments where you're just like, what is going on? This is incredible.
I would say it's like a manageable, bespoke No Man's Sky on a much smaller scale.
Yeah. Right. And instead of just like grinding for resources, you're trying to piece together whatever has gone on in this solar system.
Yeah.
It's not.
There's no resource. I played a bunch of this on Xbox. Sorry.
Yeah, me too.
And
Sorry.
I really wanted to like it, but I couldn't stand it.
Yeah.
I just,
Really, you can get
the
into it?
aesthetic is so like just. It's like if you made a list of things I don't like looking at, and then it's like, oh, it's a rustic wooden spaceship piloted by things that look like they came out of a DreamWorks movie.
That's actually not a bad way of putting it.
That's
banjo
fair.
music.
That's fair.
Yeah, it's like camping in space, pretty
Yeah.
much, is the style.
No, it's cute, and a lot of people. I'm glad people like it. So
Outer Wilds is now available. Obra Dinn comes out on October 18th.
Yes.
So yeah, you can look
Both
forward
games you should look forward to.
to Tom's beloved games.
Seriously, 2 of my favorite games in the last 2 years, and they're both coming out the same week, and it's really, really great.
And we'll have plenty more games to talk about in the weeks to come. As we mentioned, The Outer Worlds is coming out later in October. After Party comes out in October. Obviously, Medieval is at the end of October as well. Death Stranding in November. We have a lot of games to come in the weeks to come. I said that twice.
Yeah.
But anyway, don't worry about that. What you should worry about is that when you're not listening or watching Beyond, we are doing a bunch of other stuff. So head to IGN.com, head to YouTube.com/IGN for all of the content we're producing, all the amazing features, written previews, reviews, news, hilarious videos with AI news.
oh yeah, please go check that out. Brian and I did a new show where we literally found an AI that does like computer generated speech, and we started punching in like headlines for video game related news stories, and then read the preceding
It's so
results.
good.
Batman
It's so
can't
funny.
stop farting around
Just
children.
yes,
Is that-
type in
yeah.
Batman can't stop farting on the search engine, and I'm sorry in advance, and good luck with that one.
It's so funny. You should definitely check it out. But of course, in addition to checking all of that stuff out, you can find us on Twitter. Tom is at Tom R. Marks. I am at JM Dornbush. Lucy is at Luce O'Brien, Luce O'Brien. And Max is at Max Scoville. Beyond is live every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Pacific at beyond.ign.com, youtube.com/IGN Beyond, and your favorite podcast services around the world. Remember, you can write into beyond@ign.com with stories and comments and questions and whatnot. We'll be back next week. Thank you so much for listening or watching. And as always, Beyond.
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 Okay.